If you're like me, you like your slicer with the latest and greatest features, and that's why today I'm taking a look at OrcaSlicer 2.3.1 Alpha and the hot new features, including a new way to calculate flow, fuzzy skins, and input shaping. So let's go ahead and get started. Don't forget, if you like my work, please hit a like, subscribe, and hit that bell to get the latest updates in 3D printing and OrcaSlicer. I also want to take a minute to thank all the recent members to my YouTube membership. Every little bit helps the channel, and I really appreciate your support. So this week, the newest version or alpha release of OrcaSlicer has been dropped, and that is version 2.3.1 alpha. Now, this version has some great new features, which I think are important to note. They include a new sparse infill rotation system, a new way to do flow calibration, changes to fuzzy skin, and also input shaping for Klipper and junction deviation calibration for Marlin. Now, with all these new features, today I'm just going to do a deep dive into the new Archimedean Chord's flow rate calibration so we can see how to do that. And then another follow-on video, I'll take a look at the other features. That way I want to keep this video short and don't want to waste your time. So with that being said, let's take a look at the new flow calibration. Now, this image is from the Wiki and from the release notes of OrcaSlicer. Now, I will point out that the Wiki has been updated to show this new test rather than the old. The old test just used a standard surface, and you basically ran your fingers across it till you found the smoothest surface. Now, this new version instead uses a concentric pattern. I believe this is an Archimedean Chord. And what happens is if your printer is perfectly calibrated, the whole surface should be smooth. If you have over-extrusion, particularly on the outside circles, and I'm pointing at this 0.03 chip, you'll notice that the edge of the circle is really sticking out, and that's because there's not enough room and it's over-extruding. Now you look at some of these other ones, it's hard to see, but maybe there's some valleys in here, and that's under extrusion. So ideally, you'll be able to visually look at these and feel them, find the smoothest one. Now, to compare, I'll bring up the current stable version of OrcaSlicer and then bring up the pattern in the new alpha, and we can look at the differences between the two. So here's the YOLO test in the current version of OrcaSlicer, and you'll notice that the surface pattern on the top layer is basically these diagonals going back and forth at what I believe is 45 degrees. So you see that. Then if we go over to the new version, there's the circles. And what will eventually happen with these circles, if you have over-extrusion, the circles show up real well on the surface and you'll be able to feel it. And then my understanding is for under-extrusion, you'll actually feel the valleys where the indentations really strongly. And the perfect version, going back to the documentation, would be the one that's perfectly smooth by feel and then by look. So I've gone ahead and printed both the old version and the new version. And let's compare the two. And then we'll see if we can tell a difference. And we'll also see if when I'm doing this test in the flow, if my results I'm getting are significantly different. So I've laid out both tests here. I have the top is the original. The bottom is the new. I'm going to apologize. My desk is shaking a little bit. Apparently one of my printers is touching the edge of the desk and I don't want to move anything because it's of course a long print. I actually feel like I have this printer dialed in pretty good, and I'm showing a 0 here as maybe the best. And then down here, 0 is the best. Now let's look at this tab a little bit and just identify some stuff. You can see the circle here, but to me it feels like it's the smallest, that circle between the inner and the outer, and I'm really not seeing any gaps in the lines. And I think this is fairly smooth as well, negative 0.01 and positive 0.01. I think that's a little bit too much filament. So I'm thinking the 0 in the new test is about the best. Like I said, you want to run your finger across it, visually look at it, and see if you can identify any flaws or if it doesn't feel smooth. Like I said, there is a little bit of a bump here with between the inner and outer ring, but I think that's okay. And then picking up the 0 slice over here, it feels pretty dang smooth here and looks good and appears to have a nice shine to it. So I feel comfortable leaving my flow as is. Now let's go back over to OrcaSlicer, or first the Wiki, and let's take a look at a couple things. So first, in the Wiki, the new test is under the YOLO recommended. So let's just remember that. It's also based on the filament's current flow rate. So if you have the flow rate already set, it doesn't reset it back to 1. It's based on what it's currently set at. So if you happen to use, like the example down here, you had it set to 0.98 and this 0.01 chip was the best, you would just be changing your flow to 0.99. So you would not be starting at 1 and doing all that stuff, which I find pretty handy because I'll forget to set the flow back to 1 with the other tests, and sometimes that can mess things up. Now, it should be noted, and it says this in the description here, that it is okay to have a visible line between the inner and outer spiral. You're just looking for things that show very little gap between the lines. And then, like I said, feels good, looks good. So you should get a pretty solid result. Now, in my case, I feel like the printer, of course, I don't remember dialing in the filament on this printer, but I tend to do that. I forget that I've dialed it in, and maybe I did that weeks ago, and it's been running good. So my answer is still 0, which means I don't have to change the flow rate. Now let's go over and just remind you where to change that flow rate value. So back in OrcaSlicer, you're going to go to the filament section, you're going to edit it, and if you scroll down right in the middle of the filament tab is the flow ratio. Now I mentioned my value of 0 was good, so I'm just going to leave that flow ratio as is. Now in a case where your flow ratio is different, you either, if it's a positive chip you picked, you add to the flow ratio. If it's a negative value, just simply subtract. And that's pretty easy. Now keep in mind that this is alpha software. If you do find a bug, you're going to go to the OrcaSlicer GitHub page, go to issues, and then look at the existing issues, maybe search them, and see if anybody has already put a report in for the bug that you have. There may even be a solution already. And you'll notice here that people have listed bugs. Now I've opened one of these issues, and you want to make sure that you have searched existing issues to make sure you're not double reporting. When you report your bug, put which OrcaSlicer version you're using, your operating system, maybe your OS version, and some additional system information. And then make sure you accurately document and give enough information there that somebody could reproduce the error. Even go so far as to write the steps to reproduce the error, include which printer you're using. And with all this information and any screenshots you attach, that's a very big help to the developers. In fact, you can also upload your debug log if you got an error or a crash. So just keep that in mind, and that's something to really help the developers. Before I close out, I'd like to thank the developers of OrcaSlicer for their great work. And I gotta say, I really like this alpha, and it seems rock solid to me. I'm also enjoying some of the new tests. Now, if there's a feature that I haven't talked about or you feel I should highlight, just leave me a comment and I'll get back to you as soon as I can. If you have any questions, feel free to leave those as well. Now, I want to thank again all my subscribers and my members for supporting the channel. Thanks. Have a good day.